chuck on that now. There we go. And what we're going to do is I'll introduce Raewyn here. So Raewyn, I'm very fortunate enough to introduce you guys to her. So Raewyn is a chartered member of the New Zealand Institute of Directors and currently serves as the Deputy Chair of the Equestrian Sports NZ Eventing Board. She describes her passion as building an organization's capability through its people and relishes the opportunity to share her skills and knowledge from her professional career and sporting involvement to enrich people's sporting experiences. So very excited to bring her on. And Raewyn, on to you, eh?
Thanks, Nick. And yes, I'm very excited to be here tonight. I've attended Sport 102's workshops before, and I've really gained value out of learning from other sports codes and the other people who are there. So today, not only will I be sharing some information that I've pulled together for you, but also having some interactive sessions. So after a bit of content, Nick will split you off into some random breakout groups, and then we'll come back. So yes, very excited. I'm going to share some slides as we go through, and then when we come to go to the activities, we'll come back out of the slides to the group. So here we go. I thought, well, some of you I've met before, some of you haven't, so I thought I'd give you a 5-second introduction to me. So this is me in my happy place, walkie-talkie around my neck, clipboard in hand, striding across the cross-country course. So it's cross-country convener with all volunteers in the right place at the right time, doing the right things. Here I am in a happier place with the Equestrian Sports New Zealand Eventing Board. And here's my happiest place. So out there actually on the cross-country course, having a great time with one of my horses. So here we have, now don't panic folks, this is the Sport NZ governance framework. I don't expect you to be able to read this, and links to this will be coming out in the email afterwards, so don't worry if you can't read it. But you'll see on the right hand side 4 pillars. The first one there, clarity and cohesion, that's the first pillar that Rodney did a great job of in the last Sport 102 governance workshop. And you'll see in the first key element there, clear organisational purpose. And we did some activities around that. Tonight, I'm going to take you over to the next pillar, which is around people. And there's a number of key elements in that which we will get stuck into tonight. So tonight's workshop, I'll be sharing some information that I've collated from various sources, primarily Sports New Zealand. If you haven't been to their website, there's a wealth of resources there. Also Active, which is a group of regional sports trusts up in the Auckland region who pulled together some brilliant resources, and of course the Institute of Directors. So the first resource I'm going to turn to is Sport New Zealand's 9 essential questions for the board. And number 8 on their list is, do we have the right people around the table? Do we have an active succession planning process? Does our board have the right mix of skills, diversity, and backgrounds to provide effective and credible leadership? So we'll do a little bit on what succession planning is, talk about board succession planning, talk a little bit about your organising and event committee succession planning, and then just a few things that I really liked out of the resources I looked through is what can make the life of a volunteer easier, and volunteer core drivers. Now, I don't know whether any of you have listened to Wayne Goldsmith from Australia, any of his podcasts, or but one thing he said once really stuck with me is that there's 2 things about getting people into sport and keeping them, and it's the quality of the experiences they have and the relationships they develop. So not only did I want to sort of talk a little bit about the mechanics of the some tool sets that you can use to do succession planning, but also look at some mindsets as well. So succession planning, why is it critical to think about succession planning? Well, what we want is the knowledge that exists within our group to be preserved and passed on. We want succession planning to create a smooth transition from one volunteer to the next, and particularly when they're in key roles, being, well, obviously the board and the chair, but also key roles in the organisation. Succession planning encourages the sharing of the workload amongst volunteers, which can help against volunteer burnout. And volunteers will feel more confident, prepared and supported if they receive training and or mentoring to fill the roles. And if you do succession planning, you'll be prepared when those vacant roles come up. Now, here's a great quote from out of one of the active resources. When I read this, it sort of hit me right between the eyes. It's like, one of the concerns people have before they even agree to volunteers is they won't be able to leave the role due to lack of willing and able volunteers to take over. So I think this is like bang on. How many times have you sort of hesitated before you said, yeah, I'll do that, because you know you'll be stuck with it? Or, yeah, you know, people just not putting their hand up. So this can be avoided if you have a succession plan and you'll have excellent people and processes in place to support that transition. So what is succession planning? A process which involves identifying and developing individuals with the potential to fill the key leadership positions when exiting post holder, when the existing post holder vacate the role. And I think a key word in there is potential. So once you've identified someone with potential, you can develop them. What you want to avoid is the AGMs coming up. Who can do that? So, identify and develop some people so you have a range of options rather than just finding some person on the spot who potentially could or couldn't, but will do it anyway, kind of thing. And why? To ensure the organisation will continue to operate without the presence of people who previously holding the key positions. And I think we've all heard this in organisations. Oh, it was brilliant when Shannon was, you know, the chair because da-da-da-da-da. Or when Don was the treasurer, you know, like we were never short of money or whatever, etc. So that's what we want to do, is ensure that we operate efficiently, effectively, well, take the sport forward, all those good things, without having that reliance on a single person dependency. So let's look at succession planning for the board. And this question here, going back to the question number 8 from those 9 key questions from Sport NZ. Does our board have the right mix of skills, diversity and backgrounds to provide effective and credible leadership? And there's 2 components here. First of all, I want to look at the structure, the composition, and the question being, does your constitution actually set you up to be successful? You may have a constitution, you might run your board under bylaws from a national body, but does that allow you to have the collective skill set and appropriate voices or perspectives around the board? So do you have a mix of board members that are elected, appointed, representative, and do you have the ability to co-opt? Typically, you would have your elected people and your representative people. You might have players, representatives, or you might have officials. So when you're appointing, you have the ability to look for a particular skill set if that's lacking. Appointed tends to be for a set term, but co-opted is when you can co-opt a member in for a particular project or piece of work where they can sit at the board table and contribute. They may or may not be a voting member while they're there. So does your constitution set you up for success? Another thing that's used in boards is a portfolio approach. So you actually recruit for a specific role. So elected position might be you want a player's representative, or you want an official's representative. You may have appointed positions, which you said we are looking to appoint into our finance portfolio or our marketing. So depending, and we'll get to the question around what are your strategic needs? So are you recruiting for a collective skill set, but also your particular strategic needs at the time? Structure, tenure, and rotation. So does your constitution state what tenure those positions are for, and are they on a rotation? And that will allow for continuity and timed competence. I'm actually quite surprised. I was on my son's school board, and they actually have elections for all members, the staff and the parents, all at the same time. So the board before the one I joined, it was completely new. They had no one coming across. The principal sits on the board, ex officio, but that was the only person, and that was the principal was an employee of the board. So having a look at your tenure, do you have positions rotating off each year so that you've got that continuity? And also too, when you're thinking about new people coming onto the board, often that first year, they're a little bit possum in the headlights, and they're just getting to grips with the rhythm of the board and how it operates and what they need to do to contribute effectively. So you'd want to make sure that you're not getting a lot of new people all at the same time. So here's my board that I'm on, and this is us watching the Olympics, because we had a COVID postponed board meeting, AGM/conference, and we agreed when the date was, forgetting it was the Olympics. So here we are having our lunch break and watching Janelle Price, New Zealand's one Olympians, and she's currently world number 2 at the moment. But the next question is, are you structurally set up? Now, what actions are you taking around succession planning? So are you taking deliberate and structured approach to selection and replacement of members and the chair? So structured means, you have a set process where 3 months before the AGM, when people will be elected, the advertisement goes out with the job description, the closing date, and application forms are here. Please provide your CV, and then that goes out to your members so much time before the AGM. Deliberate is also another thing. Is yes, you're sending out that invite, but are you then going around and shoulder tapping people, or people who's potentially on your horizon, or people you've been doing a little bit of mentoring and coaching with, and saying, well, are you ready for it this year? So deliberate and structured approach. The governance challenges, so I mentioned this on the last page. Are you proactively communicating those challenges to the people who will be influencing the board selection? So if those are your members electing people, or that's an appointments panel or subcommittee of the board that you've put in place, because unless you're doing that, quite often what you find is people on the board may be there more because of their personal networks or profile, rather than the ability to contribute to the board's work at this particular phase of the board's life. Board completes a skills matrix prior to appointing or electing members. Now, this is quite interesting, because quite often what you find is that you will need a balance around the board table of people with operational experience within the sport, and those also who have the ability to operate at the more conceptual level. So you don't want to be attracting a lot of people who've got good conceptual skills, but are a little bit distant from the sport. But then you don't want you want the balance, you don't want it the other way, where you've got a lot of people who are very operationally focused. And then, yes, do you actually have a list of potential board members? So those are the ones that you, let's go shoulder tap them for this, or let's make sure, we're including them in any working groups we might set up so they can get a taste of governance, and then next election they might put their hand forward. Now, just talking about the skills matrix, again, Sport NZ has a great template around this. You as a board could actually, this is just a snippet out of it, you could actually go down the left-hand side and say, okay, given our board and the nature of our sport and the maturity that we're at and the challenges we're facing, what are the desired things that we need from our board members? And then go through and look at who's got what and where your gaps are and recruit from that. Another way I've seen this displayed is actually doing it quite visually. So if people aren't quite as analytical as a matrix, get people to fill it in and then put it up on a board, and everybody goes and puts their dot where they see themselves sitting, and then you can identify where the skills gaps are. And so in your advertisement for a board member, you can be saying, we're particularly looking for, maybe you're doing a facilities refresh, or you're putting in a new database, and you haven't actually selected the product. So you actually want a board member who's got some experience in technology or facilities, etc. So, Sport NZ have a brilliant resource called 9 Steps of Effective Governance, and they've just refreshed that with a new version last year. And the key questions that came in their people section was around this. So, board composition, are the directors clear? Is the organisation clear around the key challenges? You've done your needs matrix, etc., etc. It's all there for you to read at your leisure. So, first activity, question for you. How has your board's constitution or your governance structure evolved over time? And does it currently support effective governance and leadership as best it could? So you're looking at that from constitution, the portfolios, tenure and rotation. So all boards, evolve over time, but currently, just have a little bit of a check-in here. So I'm going to stop sharing now. That's your task. Hopefully you've jotted it down. And then hand over to Nick, who is going to pop you into groups. And we will see you back in about 4 minutes' time.
Here we go. So feel free to join your rooms. Kia ora, team. Alrighty. There we go. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So that would be something to discuss. How do we get people more involved with being on the board? I put my hand up. I said, because of my interest in basketball, and I have a son playing, and I've been involved in basketball Manawatu for many, many years. I said, yeah, I'll come on. And, I was lucky to go on because they wouldn't have had a full board.
Yeah. Wow.
So, it's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And maybe we have to look at the governance and say, what do we have to look at, and how do we help people feel comfortable coming into this position?
Yeah, a lot of people are scared by it, eh?
Oh, they are. Yeah. And I work in schools, same thing. Getting parents involved in schools, it's difficult.
Yeah.
We're going back. Stefan, you better have to say, because we're going to go back in a couple of minutes.
I guess to Otago, what you're saying essentially is the parent board members are the ideal, but we struggle to get them on. They all say, I'm not qualified, or I don't have any skills, but we need you almost with or without skills at some level just to be a parent representative. That's the skill you provide. But I think the first governance role I was put into was the same as you, Murray, was a little bit of pushing and prodding sometimes, because they can struggle to fill a board. And that's not ideal. That's not the way to come into it. But
No.
it happens here without the succession planning being quite clear.
So, David, do you have, you have this where you've got to be re-elected after 3? Are you having problems getting people on your board?
No, we were oversubscribed. So two of the people who applied this year hadn't been involved in any of the other committees with swimming, and lots of people are volunteers. So we put them on the management committee, and we'll look to roll them into the board in a year or two.
Yeah.
You're on mute there, Raewyn.
Crikey, you'd think by now we wouldn't do that, would we?
There's always one.
So we're all back. Oh, I was in group 2. Upset. Yeah, that's done. I was in group 2. I'd be keen to hear from another group. How many groups did we have, Nick?
We had 4 groups, and I jumped into one group with David. Do you want to share what you guys were discussing in your space?
Yeah, so we were discussing about getting people on the board. So Murray was talking about basketball and a struggle to get people onto the board. Used to be an issue for us too, but we've put some pathways in place which seem to have helped a lot to encourage people onto different committees first before stepping up onto the board, because it can be scary for people to get involved on the board because they're used to being involved with the clubs and things. It's almost like especially a regional board is almost like the big brother, if you like. And it's breaking down that us and them type approach, because we're all in this to work together. So we've got quite a good pathway now with swimming in particular to get people through onto the board. In fact, this year we were oversubscribed, I was saying to Murray, so we've put a couple of people onto the management committee instead, which was great. So that'll be future board members. We have a structured rotation and an enforced step down after 9 years of board membership.
That sounds like you're in great shape. Thanks for that. And I like how you're talking about the pathway, because I was about to say, what were those pathways? And you said, yes, you've got committees, so subcommittees of the board, and you can get to see them in action, and you just get them on your radar for future board members.
Yeah, and it helps people step up from being involved with a club to actually looking at it from a regional approach within those committees. Yeah.
Is there one other who'd like to share some insights you got from, or shared with others, or got from others? Someone who wasn't in Nick or my group?
I'm going to almost target someone.
No, that's okay. We'll keep on schedule and we'll crack on with the next thing. So I'll go back to sharing slides, and we'll talk about the next level down. Oopsie days, let's get back up to there. And here. So the next level, and with this one, so this is sort of what we're just talking about there, the next level down, sort of the management level. So whether you've got organising committees or whether you've got event committees, maybe you're hosting national competition or you're hosting an international level competition. So you might have an event committee which carries lots of reputational financial risk for your board, and obviously finance and risk is big on boards' agendas. So you may do some of this planning yourselves, or you may have a board member who has a portfolio in regards to these two things. Or if you are in the position where you actually have a paid employee, a CEO or a sports manager, this is something that you would expect them to do. So as a board member, you need to have enough knowledge to look at something and go, yes, that's great, that's what we're looking for, or could you please go away and do some more work here? So the objectives of your succession plan is to identify those individuals who are willing and able. You might have people who are more willing than able, so provide some development experiences for those ones. So see the potential in people and then put, go away, sorry. It's all about the development, the next generation of leaders, and ensuring that those critical processes are documented and clear. So here's a fantastic resource from, there we go, from the Active Toolkit on succession planning. How do you actually do succession planning? And the, oopsie, sorry, 6 steps there. So the first one is to identify the key positions, then look at role descriptions, identifying your gaps, put a succession plan, identify the training, and ensure things are documented. And we're just going to rock through each of those. So the first one here, identify the key positions, and I've put an event in. And the thing with this is that there are different types of volunteers. So you've got the ones who are skilled, the ones who can just rock up and do one of these roles. And then you've got the ones who actually need to be qualified. So if you've got a succession plan, I would suggest your horizon of that succession plan is the time to competence for those roles. So you'll look down, say, bottom right-hand corner, spotters. So that's the person standing next to the commentator in this event saying, you know, rider number 162 has just gone through the water. So the commentator will broadcast that out and keep the commentary going. You don't have to be trained to be a spotter. You can grab someone, literally 5-minute brief and away you go. However, if you're looking at crisis team leader, they will need to have some skills. They will need to have some experience. How long does it take to get to that? That's how long your succession plan would be. Technical delegate, that is actually a qualified role. So, and it also depends the definition of key positions on how much responsibility you have in your board for the development of the coaching and the officials and all those kind of things, or how much you're tapping into your national sporting organisation. Once you've identified the key roles, it's actually putting a role description together. So sometimes you may not feel like you have a need to actually create job descriptions, but I would suggest that the bigger the role, like an event convener, and the more high profile the event or the competition is, you may need them, so you may benefit from having them. And then the other thing there is ensure you clarify the term of the role. So again, going back to that quote, in terms of people don't want to volunteer because they think they'll be stuck there forever. So make sure you do the term. Next, to stage 3 and 4 is identify the gaps and areas of weaknesses in your resources and create a succession plan for each position. So this is my succession plan here. I identify these key roles. All the conveners work a key role. And what we're looking at is who is your incumbent in those roles. If it comes to competition day or event day or the AGM or whatever that key role needs to, when they need to deliver, if they can't do it, is there a person who can step in and carry the day? And you know, it's not a showstopper that we've got a single person dependency. And who is the successor to the incumbent? They're ready now or within the next 12 months. Who is their successor, ready in 1 to 2 years, so maybe one role away? And who's the next successor to that, who's maybe 2 roles away or 3 to 5 years? And again, those definitions of those timeframes will be timed competence in your environment and your board. So cracking on to activity number 2. Asking you here, what are the key roles in your organisation? And do you have an incumbent step in as successor or successor's successor? And I was going to ask you to look at this from 2 perspectives. So this is from a strategic lens and then from an operational lens. So strategically, here's a question for you. If, for example, if you were running a club and financial sustainability was a strategic issue for you, say it was a football club and you've got first kicks and those are the guys, girls from 4 to 6, I would suggest that that bottom of the funnel where you're bringing the players in would actually be a key role, because you don't want to get to the stage where the kids get to the end of being a 6-year-old and they go to start their 7th grade competition and there aren't enough numbers to make up a team. So they go off to another club. And then that flow-on effect accumulates. So you're losing your player base, you're losing your financial sustainability that goes with it. That's a little snippet from me. But in your groups, the next 4 minutes, let's see what you think your key roles are and whether you have incumbents, step-in, successors, and the successor. Crikey, that's hard to say. Take it away, Nick. See you guys in 4 minutes.
Could step into it, but can't find anybody to do my role. Damn. Especially if we run competitions, because I'm also, as well as a secretary, I'm the event coordinator and planner and whatever. So luckily we have 3 or 4 that step in to help do that bit, but not actually do the paperwork and the food and the other stuff. So I suppose when you've only got a club of 12 and you've got 10 on the committee, succession. Right. So we're frantically getting new members, but actually getting them along when there's not competition is the hard bit. Because with masters, they only pay fees if they're not injured. And they'll pull out at the last minute or enter at the last minute, depending on their injury status. And that's just the nature of athletics being so small.
Yeah.
Basketball was so much easier.
Yeah. Yeah, well, we have some paid employees, so we're quite lucky in that respect, although we have a huge risk in that our sport development advisor is kind of the face of Parafed, and if she falls over, everything falls over. We've had that situation where she got sick last year, and we thought everything was going to fall over. We actually had someone who stepped in, but as he said, he just kind of babysat for 6 months. So yeah, there's a definite risk in that.
Is your paid employment under grants, or is it fundraised, or is it government subsidy type stuff?
It's all of the above.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so so there is some kind of sort of subsidy comes through Sport NZ, Sport Manawatu,
Yep.
but then there's also grants for salaries. Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we used to do with basketball back in the day, just so that you could have someone running it. I'm not sure who's even doing the role at the moment, but
Yeah.
the grant used to come in $80,000 split between two. One half of it went towards the Jets community coaching, the other half went for the salary of the paid employee. But what we found was they were getting so late paying it that you couldn't rely on the grant, because eventually it was 12 months behind.
Oh yeah.
So
Yeah.
it made it be hard.
Yeah.
But whereas we don't have that issue with Masters Athletics, but we do rely on like the pathways. We are all officials. We are all, some of them have to be qualified for judging, and so you have to try and get your ticket for that. Technical experts, we have to rely on senior, most of the masters travel around the country doing open grade as well, like last weekend in Hawke's Bay, but and we have to rely on them to come and help us when needed, when we have tournaments or competitions, because you can't run it and compete. It makes, well, we try, all of us try. That's why hence why I'm nicknamed Mrs. Gumboot, because if it's wet, I'm in my gumboots.
Right.
Luckily not sprinting, but yeah.
Thanks, team. Welcome back. Let's open the floor. So not my group, not Nick's group, someone else. What was the key insight that you took away from that session with your group?
Room 4, swimming and basketball and QEC. The healthy problem, we've got too many kids or participants and not enough facilities. With basketball, the CEO and events coordinator are paid positions, so the succession there, maybe they'll have less problems than who's swimming is all volunteers. But then he, with swimming, it's he doesn't have that problem because he's got people he's got on standby who is getting ready for the future. So it's a facility thing. And I was telling them a story about, I had coffee with someone from New Zealand Rugby, and he was talking to a basketball guy. The basketball guy said, rugby's lucky that they've got all these facilities, these fields. If basketball had more facilities, then they might even take more kids away from rugby, which is happening.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I think you brought up a key point that was talked about in my group, and David was talking about before, is David created these, swimming created these pathways, and now they've got an oversupply of people available. Some sports, have problems actually filling the vacancies. And so some wise words from the other David King, talking about, these things take time, and you've got to, not try and solve the whole world at one point in time, but just look at, what's the first thing you're going to focus on. And some subcommittees was one way of doing that. and that's also something, the time factor is with succession planning. It's not just a one-hit wonder where you do your plan and go tick, done, and set the document aside. It needs to be something that's continually refreshed. And in the board agenda, my board, we do an initial chat in November and then a big chat in March. And then we've got our AGM start recruiting from April for our AGM to validate appointments and elect members in July. So thanks for that, guys. In the interest of time, I'm going to go back and finish off my slides, and then we'll have some question time at the end. So step 5 was to identify the training and the mentoring needs. And this is the classic pyramid where formal structured learning is actually the smallest component of how people learn. And that could be that you get someone to come in and give you, like the Institute of Directors, give you some training around being on the board. Might be some coaching and mentoring. Say maybe the chair has a mentor, someone like Rodney, and then on-the-job learning. And I think the example of subcommittees was a great pathway for that. Last one, ensure critical processes are documented and clear. So when people are leaving, please ensure they have some handover procedures where they've got, they've updated some checklists and handover notes, etc. So they just don't disappear with all their organisational knowledge. So that is the 6 steps of succession planning, and that is in the booklet from Active, if you want to see more about that. What else can make the life of a volunteer easier? And here are some of the highlights that I saw in the Active resources. So we're not really going to spend a lot of time on those, but I just wanted to give you a snippet of what's in those resources so that you can go and get stuck into them if these things ring true for what you guys would be helpful for your boards at this point in time. So making it easier to volunteer, to begin, and then also to exit. And that was going back to that quote. So I think one thing about that making it easy to stop volunteering is actually encouraging people to proactively try and help them find their replacement and to mentor and train them up. So you could adopt a principle around it's your responsibility to find your well, it's not solely on you, but to look for a replacement and your successor and their successor. Some key things here about making volunteer easy, looking at spreading the workload. So we talked about in our breakout group, when you don't have enough on the board ends up doing more than their sort of fair share, or if you don't have enough operational people, the board starts doing operational stuff as well as governance, and the workload becomes unattractive. So there's a number of things there. The importance of leadership. This can never be underestimated in terms of the experience people have. And you've seen it, some of you have seen this before, but this is a fantastic leadership program, which is self-paced learning that Sport NZ has put together. And there's now, I say this is a fantastic framework, not just, hey, Raewyn thinks this is great. I used to actually, in one of my jobs, be the head of learning and development for ANZ Bank for New Zealand. And we used to spend a lot of money on a lot of providers to deliver our leadership program. And this was the framework we used. The same stages, obviously it was tailored to the corporate environment. This is a really sound framework. Sport indeed have done a brilliant job of those resources, so I can't sort of encourage you enough. If leadership is something you want to grow in your organisation, to hook into this. The next one here, conflict resolution. Now, there's something about boards that people, I don't think, is clearly understood for those coming onto the boards, because you have a variety of perspectives and skill sets around the table. There should be healthy conflict, and that's actually one of the hallmarks of an effective board, is that they engage in healthy conflict. So there's a culture of openness and constructive challenge. Divergent views are aired, and I'll say appropriate dissent is valued. And that's really, in conjunction with professional and robust debate. So all board members have a responsibility for creating that inclusive culture that enables contribution with respect. And of course, the chair is the main driver of that. At an operational level, there's a number of things in the resource toolkits around conflict resolution. I'll just highlight the first bullet point there, is you deal with the problems as soon as possible. So they say small and don't turn into larger ones. So as chair of the board, quite often you get things escalated up to you, and you need to have the time to be able to deal with those promptly. Thanking volunteers, again, coming out of the research from Sport NZ, we all know this, that those who are thanked feel that they're appreciated and more likely to stick around. Another core piece of research that Sport NZ did was around the core drivers of the sport. And I think if you're looking for volunteers, a little bit of understanding about this and ensuring that this volunteer experience is a two-way street, that they're giving to the sport, but the sport is actually giving to them as well. And so what they found is that there were 4 key drivers for people: generosity, love of the sport, social connection, and appreciation. With that, there is actually 9 different mindsets there as well. And this is where I think, when you're looking for board members, something you need to sort of look into this. Like if you are, if you've got to do, say, a facilities review or facilities upgrade, down in the bottom right hand corner there, you want someone who's always trying to, see if they can do something better. Well, here's the project for you. The cultural norms over there, it's what you do. When I hear that, I sort of think of that person who volunteers and then sits in the meeting and says nothing at all. So have a look at the mindsets as well to be successful in terms of having a board that has the tool set, the skill set, and the mindset. So before I open up to any general questions, key messages for today, which I hope you take away, is that succession planning is critical and should be completed at both the board and the organisation level. Having the right people around the board table can be facilitated by the structure. Make sure your constitution sets you up to be successful, but also action. So structured and deliberate action. And yes, it's everybody. It's actually everybody's responsibility to develop your, or identify and develop your successor and your successor's successor. Lots of resources here in the slides. There's the books there. But on that note, I will stop sharing and open it up for general questions you have. And I see that Nick is suggesting any questions you may have in the chat, or feel free to, because we've got 5 minutes, just unmute yourself and ask away.
Just a little side note, Raewyn, I really noticed popping into all the meetings that there was a large difference between the volunteer space as well as the paid RSO spaces in terms of the board. And I thought that was quite interesting to kind of get an insight on the major differences and that effect it has on those board members, i.e. some of them actually coming in and having to do a lot more work on the ground versus delegating. And I found that quite interesting. So if you have anything on that, that'll be really insightful.
Yes, the rule of governance is, noses in, hands out. But I think we all know in the volunteer space that you quite often do have to get hands on. Our board has been looking at how we get that in the sport, that everything's covered off, but it's not all the board members' responsibility. So we're looking at co-opting members, working groups, subcommittees, advisory groups, and yes, sharing the load, and then getting people, say the chair of a working group to go out and then recruit members. So it's not all on the board members themselves. And I think we've had some real success stories tonight around that.
Yeah, I think a takeaway for me for the basketball, I think there's a lot of people doing, sort of that volunteer work in the background with the kids, mainly parents who have an interest in, supporting their children. And maybe, I think David brought it up, sort of bring them in slowly, give them, sort of management roles, and then sort of then provide them, if they're keen to go to the next step to the board level, give them that training to, because I think there are a lot of people, someone brought that up, that, don't feel they're up to it, or they're just not confident to come into a position like a board.
And that was one of the 9 volunteer mindsets, was the cautious but keen. People don't think that they can do it. So I remember once being asked to do some fundraising, and I was like, who, me? Ask people for money? No, but someone sat me down and went through like these funding grants you can apply to, and I ended up finding I was actually quite good at it, and haven't, 10 years later, still haven't got rid of that job. Hey, well, I hope you enjoyed my background, eventing Wellington. Got some horses in the background there and some cross-country fences, and my number 1 companion who comes out to watch a few events with me. I've really enjoyed my time today with you guys. I hope you've got some key takeouts, and I'll hand you back to Nick, who's going to talk about, he will send out some emails after this and around the slides and the recording and some feedback, I think, Nick. Over
Fantastic.
to you.
Love your work, Raewyn. Thank you very much. Hey, before you guys head off, feel free to chuck any gold nuggets that you took away from this workshop into the chat so we can take it away and move forward. And if there are any other topics you would like focused on for the next workshop moving forward, and then we can get Raewyn to answer your questions and get back to you on those ones. But yeah, feel free to chuck in the chat any gold nuggets and what we'd like seen in the future. But then other than that, Mo, would you like to do a little close for us?
E nui hea te tapa nui ka wātea. Wātea I runga, wātea I rau, wātea I waha. Wātea I roto. Ka wātea, ki ora te noho, ki ora te haere, koia I runga, whakaria aki ki runga, kia tina, home e, hui e, ka iki e.
Thank you. Appreciate it, team. And have a very good evening.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Raewyn.
Ka pai, Nick.
Cheers,
Ka
Mo.
kite.
Appreciate it, bro. Catch you later.
Thanks, Murray. Let's go.
You right there, Ma?
She's off.
She's taking the time getting out of here.
I actually didn't see should put some things in chat. So you're finished recording?
I have